What if your word is the only shield protecting someone else? What if staying true to that word lands you behind bars, punished by a system meant to uphold truth? Today, we're not talking about cold-blooded killers or cunning con artists. We're diving into the stories of those whose weapon was a pen and whose crime was silence. In 1972, as the nation was still reeling from the horrific Manson family murders, William Farr, a journalist for the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, found himself entangled in the case's notorious legal web. During the trial of Charles Manson and his followers, the judge had issued a strict gag order, forbidding attorneys and court officials from speaking to the press. Yet Farr managed to obtain and publish a sensational story containing details from a witness's sealed testimony, which included lurid accounts of the defendant's plans for a wider killing spree. The article was a major scoop, but it infuriated the judge, who demanded to know who had violated his gag order. Farr, a journalist committed to the core principle of source protection, refused to name his sources, who were two of the 6 attorneys in the case. He stood firm, asserting that to do so would be a catastrophic breach of trust. After the trial concluded, the judge relentlessly pursued him for contempt of court. Farr's defense was that California's shield law protected him, but the court ruled that the law did not grant a journalist absolute immunity, especially when it came to enforcing a court's own order. He was sentenced to jail indefinitely until he chose to speak. For 46 days, William Farr was imprisoned, a captive of his own professional ethics. His case became a landmark legal battle, pitting the First Amendment's guarantee of a free press against a court's inherent power to control its proceedings. In a statement, he underscored the gravity of his stance. To reveal a source would be to violate the trust that is the foundation of my profession. He was eventually released, but only after an appellate court ruled that his indefinite sentence had become punitive rather than coercive. How far must one go to protect a promise, when that promise challenges the very authority of the justice system itself? The year 1978 was a time of reckoning for the press, and at the center of the storm was Myron Farber, a highly respected investigative reporter for the New York Times. Farber was a classic shoe-leather journalist, known for his dogged pursuit of complex stories. His investigation into a series of mysterious deaths at a hospital in New Jersey was a masterpiece of reporting that uncovered a potential serial killer, a physician nicknamed Dr. X. Farber's articles were so compelling, they led to the indictment of Dr. Mario Jaskelevich for murder. The story was a triumph of investigative journalism, a shining example of the press holding power to account. But then, in a shocking twist, the narrative turned against the storyteller. During the murder trial, the defense attorney demanded Farber's extensive notes and confidential files, arguing they were essential to ensure a fair trial for his client. The court agreed. Suddenly, Farber was no longer just the reporter. He was a key figure in the very trial his work had initiated. He was faced with an impossible choice: surrender the confidential sources who had risked everything to speak with him, or face jail. For Farber, there was no choice. He believed that forcing a reporter to reveal their sources would cripple investigative journalism, as future whistleblowers would be too afraid to come forward. He refused to comply, invoking the First Amendment. The court's response was swift and severe. Farber was jailed for 40 days for contempt, and the New York Times was hit with heavy fines. His case, one of the most significant journalist privilege battles of the 20th century, sent shockwaves through newsrooms across the country. He became a reluctant martyr for press freedom, a man whose success led directly to his own imprisonment. How can a journalist fulfill their duty to expose darkness when the very act of doing so threatens to extinguish their own light? In the year 2005, the world of journalism was shaken by the case of Judith Miller, a star investigative reporter for the New York Times, whose reputation was built on a foundation of tenacity and high-level sources. Miller, a figure of both respect and controversy, found herself at the epicenter of a political firestorm in Washington, D.C. The case revolved around the leaking of a CIA agent's identity, Valerie Plame, an act of political retribution that reached the highest echelons of the Bush administration. Miller, though she never wrote a story about Plame, was believed to know the identity of a government official who leaked the name. The federal prosecutor demanded she reveal her source. This was the ultimate test, a clash between the government's power to investigate and a journalist's ethical duty to protect those who speak in confidence. Miller's character, a complex mix of ambition and journalistic integrity, was put on public trial. She saw her refusal not as obstruction, but as a defense of the First Amendment itself, a shield for all journalists. The court, however, saw only defiance. The resulting sentence was a stark message. As she stated before her incarceration, if journalists cannot be trusted to guarantee confidentiality, journalists cannot function, and there cannot be a free press. For 85 days, she lived in a world stripped of her professional identity, a prisoner of her own principles. The pressure was immense, a psychological crucible designed to break her resolve. Her source, Louis "Scooter" Libby, eventually released her from her promise, a move that ended her confinement, but ignited a fierce debate about the true nature of journalistic privilege. In the end, Miller's story became a cautionary tale about the razor-thin line between reporting the news and becoming the headline. What happens when the pursuit of truth leads not to a byline, but to a cell block? In the small, rural community of Glenn County, California, Timothy Cruz was more than just a newspaper publisher. He was the town's conscience, its watchdog, and its fiercest advocate. As the editor and publisher of the Sacramento Valley Mirror, a small but scrappy weekly, Cruz was known for his relentless and often confrontational style of journalism, unafraid to challenge local authorities. In the year 2000, he published an article alleging that a local probation officer had stolen a firearm from a training session, a serious accusation of corruption. The story was based on information from a confidential source. When the officer in question was put on trial, the judge demanded that Cruz reveal the name of his source. Cruz, a staunch defender of journalistic ethics, refused point blank. He saw the demand as a direct assault on the ability of a free press, especially a small, independent one, to hold local power accountable. He believed that if he gave up his source, no one would ever trust him or his newspaper again. The court, enforcing its authority, found him in contempt and sentenced him to 5 days in jail. While the sentence was short, the principle at stake was monumental. Cruz's jailing galvanized support from press freedom organizations across the nation, who saw his case as a critical test of whether the shield laws designed to protect journalists applied equally to the publisher of a tiny paper as they did to reporters at major metropolitan dailies. His time in jail was a powerful symbol of defiance. He famously declared, "There is no question in my mind that if I am going to jail, I am going to jail." It was a raw demonstration of a newsman's conviction, a fight not just for his own rights, but for the trust of the community his paper served. At what point does a local reporter's promise to one person become a fight for everyone's right to know? The year was 2006, and in the politically charged atmosphere of San Francisco, Josh Wolf, a 24-year-old independent video journalist and blogger, embodied the new wave of digital age reporting. He wasn't a household name from a major network. He was a freelancer with a camera, driven by a passion for documenting social movements from the ground up. His lens captured the raw energy of a 2005 anarchist protest, a chaotic scene that included the vandalism of a police car. Federal authorities, believing his unpublished footage held the key to identifying the perpetrators, issued a subpoena. They wanted his entire raw video archive of the event. For Wolf, this demand was a profound violation. His camera was not an evidence-gathering tool for the state. It was an instrument of the free press. He argued that forcing a journalist to surrender their unpublished work would turn them into an unwilling arm of law enforcement, destroying the trust they need to operate within communities, especially those wary of authority. His refusal was a calculated act of defiance. The court disagreed, holding him in contempt. What followed was a staggering 226 days in a federal prison, one of the longest sentences ever served by a journalist in the United States for protecting their work. His imprisonment became a symbol of the growing conflict between national security interests and press freedom in a post-9/11 world. The Committee to Protect Journalists declared that his case chilled reporting on demonstrations and other public events. Wolf's quiet, steadfast resistance inside a Dublin, California prison highlighted the vulnerability of independent journalists who lack the institutional backing of large media corporations. He was finally released after posting the controversial footage online and reaching an agreement. But his ordeal left an indelible mark. How much of one's freedom is worth sacrificing for a principle that society itself seems to be debating? In the sprawling, humid city of Houston, Texas, Vanessa Leggett, a 33-year-old aspiring true crime author and freelance journalist, was meticulously piecing together the complex narrative of a brutal murder. It was 2001, and Leggett was driven by an obsessive quest for the truth behind the killing of Doris Angleton, a local socialite. Over several years, she had compiled thousands of pages of notes and conducted countless hours of interviews, building a deep reservoir of confidential information from sources who trusted her discretion. She was not just a reporter, she was a confidant, a keeper of secrets in a high-stakes murder investigation. When a federal grand jury subpoenaed all of her research materials, every note, every tape, every draft, Leggett found herself at a terrifying crossroads. To comply would be to betray the very people who had enabled her work, turning her from a journalist into an informant. She refused. Her stand was based on a deeply held belief in a journalist's privilege to protect their sources and unpublished work, a principle she considered sacred. The federal government, however, did not recognize her as a journalist in the traditional sense, arguing that as an unpublished freelancer working on a book, she lacked the legal protections afforded to established reporters. This argument struck at the heart of what it means to be a journalist in the modern era. The court sided with the prosecution, and for an astonishing 168 days, Vanessa Leggett was imprisoned for contempt. Her case became a national cause célèbre, highlighting the urgent need for a federal shield law to protect journalists, regardless of their employment status. From her jail cell, she told reporters, "This is not about me. It's about the public's right to a free and independent press." Her long, lonely incarceration was a stark illustration of a legal gray area, a battle over definitions that had life-altering consequences. Where does one draw the line between a citizen's duty to the law and a journalist's duty to the truth? In the modern media landscape of 2019, Brian Carmody was a fixture of the San Francisco news scene, a hard-charging freelance video journalist who often arrived at breaking news events before anyone else. He operated in the trenches, selling his footage to local news stations. His career took a dramatic turn when he obtained a confidential police report detailing the death of the city's public defender, Jeff Adachi. Using this leaked report, Carmody broke a story that questioned the official narrative and embarrassed the police department. In response, law enforcement, in a move widely condemned as a gross overreach of power, obtained a warrant to search Carmody's home and office. With sledgehammers, they broke down his gate, seizing his computers, phones, and notebooks in a hunt for his anonymous source. When Carmody refused to identify who leaked the document, he was detained and handcuffed for hours, accused of being part of a criminal conspiracy to steal the report. While he avoided a formal prison sentence, The raid itself was a form of intimidation, a clear violation of California's comprehensive SHIELD law, which explicitly protects journalists from being forced to disclose their sources. The incident sparked a national outcry, with First Amendment advocates calling it a direct attack on press freedom. The police chief and the judges who signed the warrants faced immense criticism. The message was chilling. Even in a state with strong legal protections, authorities might still resort to brute force to unmask a source. Ultimately, the city was forced to backtrack, and Carmody received a significant settlement of $369,000 for the violation of his rights. But the case left a lingering question. If the authorities are willing to use a sledgehammer to break down a journalist's door, what does that say about the safety of the truths they are trying to protect inside? The year 1996 found David Kidwell, an investigative reporter for the Miami Herald, shining a light into the shadows of the Palm Beach County Jail. Known for his fearless reporting on systemic failures, Kidwell was working on a story about the brutal murder of an inmate, a case that raised serious questions about prison security and the treatment of prisoners. During his investigation, he conducted a jailhouse interview with a man who was a key witness in the murder. Kidwell built a rapport with the inmate, who trusted him with sensitive information. When the murder case went to trial, prosecutors, eager for a conviction, subpoenaed Kidwell. They didn't just want his testimony. They wanted him to become their star witness, to recount the confidential conversation he had with the inmate. Kidwell was horrified. The demand would transform him from an independent observer into a state agent, a betrayal of trust that would poison his ability to ever report on the justice system again. Citing Florida's robust SHIELD law and his journalistic privilege, he refused to testify. The judge, however, ruled that the SHIELD law did not apply in this specific criminal context and found him in contempt of court. He was sentenced to 70 days in jail. Kidwell served 14 days of that sentence before his lawyers could secure his release pending appeal. But those 2 weeks in a cell were a stark reminder of the personal cost of his principles. His case sent a chilling message to journalists in Florida, suggesting that even with strong legal protections on the books, a determined judge could still force a reporter to choose between their notebook and a jail cell. Kidwell later reflected on the moment, stating it was a fight over the public's right to know what is going on in its name, with its tax dollars, in its institutions. When does a reporter's proximity to a crime risk making them a participant in its prosecution? Each of these stories is a testament to personal courage, a steely choice between freedom and principle. The journalists we've discussed use their right to silence not to cover up crimes, but to safeguard the very ability to speak truth in the future. They became shields for their sources, turning trust into their highest value, unbroken by threats or prison bars. These cases expose a deep systemic clash between power that craves control and a press that fights for transparency. That clash isn't fading, it's just taking new forms in the digital age. So, we want to hear from you, our viewers. What do you think needs to be done to build trust between society and law enforcement so conflicts where journalists become the enemy are relics of the past? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video compelling, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our latest investigations. Your support helps us tell the stories that matter.